It appears you're out of options. Tell me about the threat known as Inferno. Professor Langdon, we need your help. 3 days ago, a man killed himself. We think it was part of something much bigger. There was a package in his pocket.
And what was it?
It's Dante's Inferno.
Dante defined our modern conception of hell 700 years ago. But these circles of hell have been rearranged. Why Dante? Why this map of hell? Dante. Dante's death mask. Yes. We've got to get to Florence. I need access to the Dante mask.
The Dante mask is no longer here. It was stolen. Here's the security footage.
Professor? That looks like you.
I have no memory of taking that mask.
You did. I just saw you.
I want to know what I'm involved with.
Why was someone shooting at you?
Everything is out of focus.
Professor, you are having visions, aren't you? The people behind this would do anything to protect the truth. You have no idea what they're capable of.
This is what I have been seeing. Look, look, look. This is not in the original painting.
Here's another one. Prophecy.
Oh my God. Dante's Inferno isn't fiction, it's a prophecy. Someone created a plague.
Our population is spiraling out of control. Inferno is the cure.
They're gonna wipe out half the world's population unless we find this virus. They left a trail.
You won't be able to trust your own thoughts for a while. Human lives are at stake. If a plague exists, you know what governments will do to get it.
The professor has become a liability.
Go, let's get him.
Here. There's always a way out.
It's nice to have you back, Professor.
If this plague is real,
Then we only have 48 hours to stop an extinction-level event.
I will do everything I can to find it.
Thanks, everybody.
Beautiful.
Ron
Thank you.
Howard. Ron, thanks so much for being here.
A pleasure. Can you hear me? There you go. Okay.
Congratulations on your third installment in this series of movies, and I think a very different one. Has that attracted you to doing a third movie? Was that you could make it sort of have its own stamp,
Yes.
be different than the others?
Yes, I felt that it it had all the qualities of what people like in these movies and why the books are so popular, what Tom Hanks loves about playing the Robert Langdon character, but it had these other components. It felt more contemporary to me, more sort of psychologically driven because of the influence on the actual story of the characters and their relationships, and also the fact that Robert Langdon is really a part of the mystery. You know, he doesn't quite know how he fits in. He's had a head injury. He doesn't know what he can trust in terms of his memory or what people say to him. And I think that is giving it a lot more intensity, and it allowed me to sort of work with his point of view as a way of going through this mystery thriller. Then, of course, there are the images of Dante's hell, and that's where Dan Brown kind of brilliantly placed the clue path. And so that was a signal to me that if Langdon is sort of trying to search his sense of Dante's Inferno and Botticelli's painting, well, that means he's maybe experiencing some pretty horrific images himself. And so, I got to play with that.
And you cast there's a pretty stellar cast, not just Tom Hanks, who's wonderful as per usual, but Felicity Jones is amazing in the film. And you have this cast of people from around the world that are in the film as well. How did you go about finding these people?
Well, the Dan Brown stories are always very international, and Tom's usually the only American in it. In this case, Ben Foster joins us.
Yeah.
His character was not written as American, but I with Ben and also with Omar Sy and Sisa Babbitt-Knudsen and Irfan Khan, the other important leads, I cast this time based on just pure charisma, and the nature of the character as described in the book and then in the script. And I wanted, kind of like Maltese Falcon or one of those great old mystery thrillers, that every time a character shows up, they're charismatic, they're interesting, you're very watchable, and you wonder how they're going to fit in. And I wanted that for this movie. And so I cast those people, and they're all stars and great actors, and I thought they brought a lot to the movie.
And I would say, like the Maltese Falcon, every time they show up, the plot unfolds and sort of layers on top of itself even more, and you get even, I wouldn't necessarily say confused, but a little more curious about where you're going and where you've been this whole time.
Well, this movie definitely has more twists than the others, and as I said, the characters, relationships factor into it. So it's not entirely about the crisis at hand, and nor is it really about history or a philosophical idea from the past, religion, say. It's a crisis of the moment. It's overpopulation, something we've all thought about. Society hasn't known how to cope with it. Perhaps it's running out of control. And that leaves us sort of a vacuum. And into that vacuum, as sometimes happens, comes a very, very dangerous, fanatical individual with passionate in his beliefs, who has a very dangerous, terrifying solution to the problem.
It's very similar to a Bond film in some ways. Was that something that interested you as well, as sort of turning this Robert Langdon character into a kind of intellectual Bond?
Well, he's always been, he's kind of Sherlock Holmes. He's a little bit James Bond. There's a little bit of Jason Bourne in there. The difference is, it's not a man trained for action, and nor would he define himself as a detective. He's not looking for criminals in his life. He's an expert. He's an academic with a unique skill set, and that puts him into these situations. So, it's one of the things that I think makes the Dan Brown books, and for those who enjoy them, the movies, I think entertain in a lot of different ways. Is you can lose yourself in just the journey of going, and this time we're actually on IMAX, which is a great way to see the movie. It's the first time we've been IMAX.
Did you shoot in IMAX cameras? Or?
No, we didn't. We didn't. But the conversion has gotten to be so good, and we had plenty of time in our release schedule, and they did it, and we tested it and looked at it, and wow, I mean, it's very impressive. You can also follow the story, as the page turner, as the thriller. Follow the plot points and follow Robert Langdon, as all that unfolds. And then there are the controversial ideas that Dan builds into it, and the stories are meant to be, of this world enough, and take a story you can take seriously enough, and a set of characters you can take seriously enough that you have to contemplate the question at hand.
How has developing technologies changed the way that you go about blocking, structuring, and thinking about scenes at this point? Going back to when you first started making movies, you have one 35mm camera on set, essentially, and you're shooting a scene for a few days because you're getting as much coverage as possible, to now where you have CGI, you could have multiple digital cameras, or you could be shooting on IMAX, or you could be like Ang Lee, and you could be shooting 120 frames per second 3D.
Well, I think that technology is allowing directors to come closer to getting those images and ideas and feelings that exist in their mind out onto the screens to audiences, and that's thrilling. Definitely you can work faster. That's very important for us because we go and shoot in these real locations where a day's worth of shooting, normally perhaps we'd be allotted 2 or 3 hours, and before we have an angry museum director or a pissed off priest or somebody telling us, your time's up.
Or a mob of Italians. Tom Hanks.
Get out of here. Well, that you deal with as well. But Tom's very cool about dealing with the tourists, and we don't always clear the area. We never really shut these places down entirely, or if we do, it's just for such a brief amount of time, that often it is a matter of us kind of slipping in and slipping out, and it becomes almost guerrilla filmmaking.
So digital has kind of allowed you to sort of be a bit more guerrilla about the filmmaking process?
It definitely has. It also allows a little bit more experimentation because you are going faster, and cameras are getting smaller, lighter. We shot an entire scene on an actual train that before we would have built the train and done a green screen backing, and instead we did this long, intense scene that then turns into some action. We just did it in one day when we were traveling from from Venice to Florence on the train anyway. We just shot it. It was a blast. But this whole movie had this kind of energy. I wanted to infuse it with kind of the energy of a contemporary, kind of European psychological thriller with those kinds of twists and turns, those kind of naturalistic but really interesting visuals. Again, being able to use these locations that Dan puts us in helps, but so does Dante Alighieri.
It's much more, I would say, frenetically edited than I think some of your other work before this. I say that as a compliment. I mean, as I was watching it, I was kind of like, oh, like he's really experimenting a bit more here.
Well, thanks. Again, it's all driven to me by what the story suggests, and Robert Langdon's kind of fractured understanding of what's real and what isn't. I think lent itself to that kind of editing, that kind of shooting. And also again getting in the streets, into those real locations more. We not that we didn't with the other movies, but definitely spent more time on the actual locations than we had before. And also this is a very modern crisis. Again, it's not about something that went in the past. This is not about looking backward ever. So this is about today and tomorrow. And I thought that this kind of thriller ought to have that kind of modern feel. Hans Zimmer, when he saw the film, he's been giving us the music for the previous two, but he also did Rush, with me, and Backdraft, and he has so much.
Hans did Backdraft?
Yeah.
I didn't know Hans.
Yeah, that was the first time we worked together. And when he saw the movie, he said, "Ron, he said what you said." He said, "Ron, this is a very different Robert Langdon, Dan Brown thriller." He said, it's modern, it's edgy, it's psychological. We can suggest some of the themes from before, and we should, and we will, but got to approach it in a different way. And I think it's a very cool score. Deconstructing themes and giving it more drive, and it's it's another good reason to see it in the theaters, frankly, because it's great. It's a really good soundtrack.
Yeah. Well,
Chris Jenkins is an Academy Award-winning mixer. He won the Academy Award last year for the Road Warrior movie, and he did this. He did this one and did a great job.
Hans Zimmer is also always a reason to see a movie on the big screen. I think as well. His soundtracks are so much larger than life, beyond anything.
Yeah. He did another great job for us.
You said that, obviously with this film, so much of it was about the story and the story dictating how you went about it technically. I'm wondering if you've ever approached a film in your years of making movies where it was about the technical aspect first. You were really fascinated about what you could do technically with the film, and then sort of found the story afterwards, or found what you loved about the story afterwards.
I'm always first and foremost character and situation. What world can you visit? What dilemma can you deal with how are the characters being tested? That's what interests me. Then very often you have to create the environment around those characters in a way that is revealing for the audience and experiential for the audience. So whether it's the fires in Backdraft, which were 99% analog, real stuff, real flames, or the weightlessness in Apollo 13. These are big technical challenges. The races in Rush, very tricky technical challenges, using a combination of old archival footage, new material we could shoot, digital restoration of archival footage, and then tweaking it to put the right cars in, and then some digital cars, and all needed to be seamless because I wanted it to feel like it was a behind-the-scenes racing documentary shot in the 70s.
If you were to make Backdraft now, would you miss the analog element of it? Because I would imagine if you made Backdraft now, most of it would have to be computer graphic.
It would be stupid to make Backdraft now the way we did, because it was dangerous. It was really, really dangerous, and I wouldn't miss it at all. I was scared to death, kind of every day, and we had some near misses. So I think it'd be irresponsible to make Backdraft today the way we made it then.
Because you could just avoid all of those
Well,
problems.
you still couldn't avoid all of it because we had a big fire scene in the heart of the sea when the Chris Hemsworth character is trying to escape the ship. And, there's some CG fire in there, but even the foreground stuff that you need to do analog, it's hot, and it threatens to burn your set down if you don't watch it, and it threatens to burn actors if you're not careful. And, so that's a very unpredictable thing, flames. Still very difficult to recreate digitally, by the way. And so there's still, every time you do a big fire scene, there's still a very compelling reason to do as much of it as you can in camera.
This is the 5th time that you've worked with Tom Hanks?
Fifth time as a director.
Right.
We worked together on From the Earth to the Moon, although Tom was much more the driving force there creatively as a producer and even as a writer. And he was on camera in a couple of other Imagine movies over the years. So, we've worked together one way or another quite a lot.
What's it like with the two of you on set at this point? Is it just all shorthand? You move very quickly because you know exactly how to work with each other?
Well, there's a lot of confidence. We have a lot of confidence in each other and a lot of trust. And in fact, if there's anything that I have to do, it's prod him to contribute creatively beyond his character because he's a great producer and writer and director. And I want him to engage in those ways and not just leave it all to me. This is not the relationship we had back doing Splash.
So every now and then you have to be like, no, Tom, we really want to know. What do you think here?
But yeah, and he's a fantastic resource. But he loves playing Robert Langdon. He likes. And look, you go on these adventures in a way. You live it in a way. And even though it might look like he's getting bonked on the head, he never actually does in making the movie. He gets to go to these wonderful places and not wind up bleeding.
And of course, Tom Hanks did a wonderful impression of you this past weekend on SNL. Everyone's been asking you about it for the audience here. What did you think about Tom's impression?
Well, I was well warned. He told me,
I will say you're less handsy in person than he was in the impression. His impression is very much.
I'll tell you what. To be in all fairness, and while I would say that of all the talents Tom has, he probably shouldn't try to make a living as an impressionist. But
boom, Tom, you heard it here.
But what he's depicting is me when the sun is going down. We have to get one more shot. I've got some kind of an idea. I'm trying to be encouraging, but I'm trying to get it going. And that's when I get, okay, that's great, that's good, but let's just go again. Okay, are you clear on what we're doing? And I do get very animated. And so that's sort of the beginning of that impression. And now he makes it seem like that's the way I live my life.
I would worry about any director who didn't get like that at the end of the day when the sun is going down and you want to get it done.
I think I do have a particular, penchant for gesticulation and short, semi-finished sentences.
When you're on set, you've been doing this for so long at this point, do you have just like an incredible control of your temperament on set? You're known as one of the nicest guys in Hollywood, but a director at times can't be the nicest guy in Hollywood. Do you just have an incredible control of your temperament at this point?
I have more control now than I did when I was very young, but when I was very young, I was also pretty relaxed about it. Some of that comes from growing up, on a set and being comfortable with the sort of the ebb and flow of production and the problem solving and those curveballs that appear. But I think it is kind of my nature. I'm not an argumentative person. I'm not a confrontational person, and I'm not an angry person. But I think the people that work with me, they don't underestimate that or take that for granted, because they also know that I'm focused. I have very high expectations of myself and everyone else, and I have a lot of reverence for the medium and the opportunity that is there for us. One of the things that I like to say is, in a production meeting or with younger actors. I wouldn't try this one on Tom Hanks, but I'll say, when you're making a movie or a television show, you never know when you're going to have the opportunity that the elements, the factors, are not going to coalesce to be one of those moments that people really remember. One of those moments that people play in a career achievement reel 20 years from now. And that's kind of the magic of live action production, is that there's the scripted, there's the planned, and then there are the happy accidents and the moments of discovery, creative discovery, that are so exciting. I love being in the middle of that, and I love trying to create an environment where those kinds of discoveries are made every day.
I ask that question because I applaud and am in awe of anyone who can go through a career as a director and be categorized as one of the nicest people in the world, because if you've ever been on a movie set, you have such a short, finite amount of time to get this thing right that's in your head, and it's incredibly stressful and daunting.
I'm also working with world-class people who don't need much motivation, and we can start with Tom Hanks on that one.
You're also in the midst of, actually, I want to go back to one thing that you just said about your Lifetime Achievement reel and things that are played there. When someone puts together a reel of the sort of most iconic moments from your movies, when you were editing those movies, did you see those moments as iconic? Were those your favorite moments from the movies as well? Or are you sometimes surprised by what the audience latches onto as the great moments of your films?
Well, I don't ever think of it as iconic. Once in a while, I'll say, oh, maybe that's a trailer moment. Or something for the TV spot, because it's cool and it tells the story, and it's just sort of stands on its own. But these are all building blocks, and they're pieces that you put in place, and the editing room is where you finally make the movie. But I tell you, I do so many screenings. Even though I have Final Cut, I love to test. I love to talk to audiences. I love to hear how the story is communicating, make refinements, and to be very honest, there will always be about 5% of the movie that we shot, and you could put a lie detector on me, and I wouldn't. There's some scenes I wouldn't know whether we ultimately left them in or out, because it wasn't until the very end, and then I saw it at the premiere or went to the local theater to check it out with a real audience, and then I haven't seen it since. So there are always those scenes that are good enough to be in the movie, but the question is, how's the flow? How's the rhythm? How's the information parsing out? How are we emotionally sort of calibrating it? Those are all the things that go into the DVD extras or the long TV cut, but because they're great. I mean, they're good. It's good work done by all, and those are always kind of like in and out. Are they in or are they out? And my editor Dan Hanley could come up and ask me key scenes, and I'd say, I don't remember. Do you? Did it make it? Did that one make the cut?
At this point in your career, knowing everything that you know about filmmaking and about yourself and how you function and your tastes and what you love and what works, are there any films that you look back on and say, I wish I could go back and do that one again?
Entire films? If I felt that way, I probably, what I really wish is I wouldn't have made it. Because I think all of the films have highlights. Yeah. They all have elements that I really admire and like a lot. And so and I would never ever identify any film in that way, because I think most of the movies work for a lot of people, yeah. In various ways. But so for me, there might be a couple that I sort of say, well, I loved it with all my heart, as I love every movie, but I can identify some sort of pervasive problem, and maybe we struggled to solve it, but maybe I could have invested that year differently.
There's like an old Robert Altman quote where he says, all of his movies are like his children, and the ones that you and audiences probably don't like the most are the ones that he loves the most and nurtures and cherishes the most.
Well, when I was a TV actor, and from 1960 to 1980, I was on 3 different series. Andy Griffith Show, Little Known Smith Family, which only lasted a year and a half, starring Henry Fonda, in fact. And then of course my stint on Happy Days, which was 7.5 seasons. And thank you. And so from 60 to 80, I think that's like 17 years on one series or another. And when I became a director, I related to that in a couple of different ways. One, I wanted to make as many different kinds of movies as I could. I didn't want to brand myself or zero in on a particular tone because I thought that's what was commercial or I was most adept at or anything. I wanted to explore the medium and find the right tone for the theme in the story that I wanted to tell, and build up the experience level so that people, collaborators in studios, would trust me to take the reins on a different kind of movie. And so that was one thing. The other thing was to not be frightened, to keep working. After Splash was a kind of big surprise success, that was a big moment of achievement. Then Cocoon even topped that the next year. And so I was kind of a wonderkin, kind of a young, sort of Turk of my generation. And that was exciting, but also daunting, because then it gets, how are you going to sustain it? What comes next? And I began to think about television. And I began to think about one of my great mentors, Gary Marshall, who passed away a few months ago from Happy Days. And he was a terrific director, great producer, the best boss I ever had. And he had an attitude which is you try your hardest every episode and then you let it go. Right. And I thought that's a pretty good way of looking at an entire career, is as a season of television. You're ambitious, you're not getting lazy, you won't let yourself do that, but you also, acknowledge that a good season of television is going to have a half a dozen really great episodes, and hopefully another dozen or so really strong episodes, and a few that, like we were saying earlier, they didn't click as well, and you just have to sort of, if you could accept that, and go in that kind of Zen mindset about it, you'd feel freer to make some mistakes, to experiment, and to explore.
And so much of that as well is about sort of acknowledging the fact that a good season of television is about all of the work that you can put into it, coalescing with a lot of luck and a lot of sort of found moments that make it land and work for audiences as well.
Yeah, well, movies allow for more of those found moments than TV, because the TV schedule is so tight that it almost has to be planned for. And so it's actually a rarer thing when a TV show really surprises the makers of that show. With movies, well, those are we call them happy accidents, and some directors, build for them. Kubrick and Fincher and people go 20, 30, 40 takes. They're not sadists. They're exploring, and they're hoping for that blast of invention or a happy accident.
I want to turn it over to the audience for questions, but before I do that, I want to ask you about another project that you're working on right now, which is a Beatles documentary. I think you finished it, right?
It's out, yeah.
It's out, yeah. And it chronicles a period of touring with 63 to 66, right?
62 to 66.
66.
And you can see it on Hulu, and it's still in some theaters around, which is kind of remarkable, as it's been out, for a while now as a documentary. It deals with the touring years, mostly because Apple, not the Apple we're thinking of, but the Beatles Apple records, had uncovered through fans over the years, a lot of minutes and minutes of new concert footage and some bootleg soundboards that now could be digitized and made to work really well, so that you could remind people what a great touring band they were. And so that was their aim. I saw it as a chance to sort of tell a kind of almost a survival story, an endurance test, because that's what it was for those guys. And it came at a time that was so unique in the history of pop culture and social unrest and upheaval and change, that I thought there was a good narrative in there, as well as this fantastic jumping off place, which is let audiences use contemporary technology to see them better, hear them better, and understand a little bit more, what they were as a live phenomenon.
It's also such a fascinating time for the Beatles as well, because it is, as much as it was a time of social unrest, it's a time of innocence for the Beatles in terms of the kind of music that they're creating in that time.
Well, that's what amazed me, was that in the middle of this unbelievable gauntlet of touring and cranking out, hit singles and albums, that their work kept evolving artistically, and that they kept taking chances, and they they had this sort of creative integrity and personal integrity that just would not allow them to rest on their laurels, even then, even as young guys. And that courage that they demonstrated is, I think, why they endure. Their music is, you hear it everywhere still. And look at the way the documentary is playing. This is not because they're a cute footnote. It's because the artistry, the genius yielded this unbelievable body of work that is entirely valid today.
Absolutely. Okay, audience, you have questions too. I bet you do. Hi.
Hey, Mr. Howard, big fan. Question was, do you and Tom Hanks, have you guys talked about adapting Dan Brown's The Lost Symbol? Is that coming?
Yes, we did adapt Lost Symbol and worked on it for a couple of years, and it's a terrific novel, really exciting. We never could solve it for ourselves, so that we believed that it was sort of offering on a cinematic level something fresh, something new about Langdon, and developing sort of the character and the storytelling nature of these movies. So it's a great book. I'm sure something will come of it. Maybe we'll be involved. Maybe we won't. But it's. I guess if anything, that's an example of the fact that we're not contractually bound to make these movies. We make them when we think we have something fresh to offer, and that's why there's been a pretty good gap between Angels and Demons and now. But when we read this book, we felt like, now this is fresh. This is a movie. This gives Tom Hanks more to play. This gives me something that's different tonally from the other movies, and yet still very much respects the novel. And Dan's his novels are a blast, and they're fascinating.
Absolutely. Next question.
Hi, my name is Marissa. I'm an artist, actress, and writer too. So we know that paper accepts everything, right? And now with the new technologies, you can make these things on the paper become true in the movies. In this movie, which scene that you challenge yourself to be exactly what you imagined when you read this?
Oh, really? That's a really interesting question. Well, there's a very well-written scene in the book, which involves a drone that's pursuing them through the Bobley Gardens, and I thought that was really breathtaking. Also, there's an excellent sequence that's very exciting that takes place in the attic of the Hall of 500 in Florence.
A great set piece for the movie. That entire sequence is wonderfully built out.
And we couldn't shoot in the actual place; it was too dangerous. But we replicated that, and I loved it in the book, and I wanted to come as close to what I felt reading it as I could in that action set piece.
How much do you keep the book with you on set when you're shooting the films, or do you sort of put the book down at that point and stick to your script? Because I know sometimes with adaptations, directors will sort of hold the book to make sure they have a tone or some kind still in their head.
Well, we certainly have the books around, and I've got the underlined, annotated version and all of that. I wouldn't say that I refer to it that much when I'm shooting. Sometimes I pull it out of the bag and review, because Dan actually writes in a very visual way. In fact, people think that the movies are easy adaptations because he writes in such a cinematic way, but he's tried adapting them as well, and he knows. That's why he's so sympathetic to our making changes in the script, because he knows that it first of all would yield a screenplay that was hours and hours long. A movie that would be hours and hours, not and secondly, that some of the things that he can do as a writer to either hide clues or tip people off or create anticipation and suspense. Well, they work on a literary level, but those feelings, those devices don't necessarily apply to the movies. So it's my job to make this, Inferno, a movie experience first and foremost.
Right. So much of a movie. I mean, it's the cliche at this point, but show don't tell is for a movie, and in a novel you can tell and not have to show, and there's a lot of twists and turns in this movie, and I could see as a director and a screenwriter sort of like whittling down exposition to try to make it so that it shows and doesn't tell.
Well, David Kapp, who was co-author on Angels and Demons, I worked with on the movie The Paper some years ago, and of course he did the first Jurassic Park, and I mean he's a remarkable talent, and has a great sort of well, he's a little like Robert Langdon. Dan Brown's a little like Robert Langdon, and I would say David Koepp's a little like Robert Langdon, and so is Tom Hanks. So I'm not like Robert Langdon at all. I can't remember a damn thing. I don't have eidetic memory. I barely know my name.
I think we have time for one more question.
Ron Howard, huge fan, as everybody is in this world.
Thank you.
Your movies have grossed over $1 billion. It spans so many different genres. What is it about a script or a book that immediately catches you that says, this has to be made, this story has to be told?
Well, thank you for all that, and for keeping track of the box office grosses. You know, there's a kind of a convergence because it always represents a big chunk of my life. It's also, you know, I take my commitment to Imagine Films, Imagine Entertainment, and Brian Grazer seriously. So it's also, you know, resources that we sort of share that I'm applying. You know, so
in the sense that, like, how does what I'm fascinated by sort of fit into what Imagine is doing at the same time?
I take that into account.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's when I find the story intriguing, a world I'd like to see explored. It kind of gets back to that. It's a movie I want to see. Yeah. If it's a story I think I would enjoy, that interests me. If it's represents a fresh challenge of any sort, well, that's exciting for me. If thematically it makes a point or points that I think are constructive and interesting, that means a lot. I want to believe that audiences can engage. I don't always know what's marketable. Brian Grazer has a really better sense of that than I do, but I want to be able to make a movie so that when I do go to those test screenings, and once I've refined it and understood, you know, sort of what the relationship can be between the audience and the movie, that the real majority is feeling like this is worth their time. There's a memorable movie experience. That's important to me. And last, and probably most important is, I think I have to believe that there's something about it that I am curious about or that I understand that I can bring to it that's a sort of an intangible, that decision after decision, day in and day out, that I can lend to it of myself that will, you know, distinguish it from if someone else made it.
Sort of inherently reflect your point of view, whether intentional or not.
Yeah, or my skill set or sensibilities.
Have you ever brought something to Brian Grazer, since the two of you work so closely together, that you were fascinated by, that you were intrigued by, and Brian was like, I don't think this is going to work right now, Ron? And
Yeah.
you two kind of duke it out?
Sure.
Maybe fight to the death in his office?
There's no fight to the death, and our sort of tacit understanding has always been, we'll tell each other the truth, and then, you know, we'll make an individual decision, and the other one will back that person to a T. But I've made a couple of movies that Brian sort of said, to be honest, I don't really get that. I'm not sure audiences are going to get it. I'm not sure I'll get it. And I've said, well, but I love it. And then he'd say, I'm right with you.
When it landed and was a wild success, did you boast in his office? Are you a better man than I?
The times when we've sort of flourished the most, certainly on the movie side of things, have really been the times when we're most in sync, and when we're both seeing the same thing. That's the closest thing to a sure bet that can happen. Unfortunately, there aren't enough of those to build out an entire production company, but I think that our biggest successes, whether Brian is a producer or me as a director, in which he produces as well, TV shows or not, I think that that his when our shared instincts, collective instincts, are telling us this is really worth pursuing, those have been the biggest winners.
And I think one of those is opening this weekend, right? Inferno, which people can see on IMAX, in theaters starting tomorrow.
We agreed on this one wholeheartedly.
Guys, go see Inferno this weekend. Mr. Ron Howard, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.